Hi, I'm Aura and I'm the host of Collective Mind, but I'm definitely not the only one around, so I included the others who are close, who I'm sure will be at least somewhat blurry throughout this video. But we have another therapy update. This one is interesting. I think in the last therapy update we were saying that we hadn't seen any red flags yet and everything seemed good so far with the new therapist. That has since changed. So there were some smaller to medium issues that were building for a while. I'll talk about that a little bit first, but then the last appointment that we had with her before canceling all future appointments was pretty bad. So we wanted to share that experience, I guess. Some of the smaller to medium things include she was getting really nervous and overwhelmed, we could tell, and she also said that when we asked her directly about the system-related aspects of being our therapist. And along with that, she wouldn't ask us questions, even though we kept saying that that's what we wanted and that that would help both of us, and that if she's confused about something, we would much rather her ask. And when she did, like the few times that she did ask questions, we were doing a lot to try to give her the benefit of the doubt in terms of things that she could be like ignorant about, essentially, about system things, because as long as she was willing to like learn about how it actually works and like respect that with us, that wouldn't necessarily have to be a problem. But there was a lot of stuff essentially that told us that she wasn't grasping even the like most basic aspects of system stuff, no matter how many times or how many ways we tried to bring it up. And like I said, she wouldn't really ask questions about it. We would just find out that she had no idea what we meant by alters or switching or whatever, but had said that she had no questions about it when we introduced those terms and everything. So that was already giving us a lot of concerns. I also started to feel like she wasn't really engaging with us during therapy. Like, we were doing basically all of the talking and she almost wasn't part of the conversation. It was kind of like talking to a wall. And she was taking notes and stuff like that. So like, again, I was trying to give some benefit of the doubt that she just like was trying not to talk over me, or was trying to make sure she got all of her notes figured out and stuff, or didn't have anything to say or whatever. But there was a point where I realized that like, if I'm getting the same thing out of therapy as I would be from just like journaling those same things, then it's not therapy anymore. So we were already probably 50-50 on like how much more time we were going to give her before deciding that it wasn't working out. But we had a hard enough time finding a therapist who could even take us, who had any like trauma training at all, and she had so much experience specifically treating trauma that we just kept giving her more chances, basically. Until we found out the hard way that there are some significant disagreements on how to phrase it. She is ignorant to a harmful extent about several major aspects of trauma therapy and trauma in general. And we're gonna basically talk through what happened in that appointment, because we wrote a lot of it down in a fair bit of detail. So, trigger warnings from this point forward about like victim blaming and minimizing type stuff. And a lot of it, I have my notes in front of me. I haven't read through them again yet, so if there are big things that I'm forgetting to trigger warn, I will add that in. But victim blaming is the big one. So we were asking essentially if she had any experience treating complex trauma at all, and she said no. And so we asked how she treats normal trauma, because we wanted to see like what would still fit and what we could like ask her to change for us and stuff like that. And she said she usually helps people like set their trauma off to the side so they can live their lives and realize that it, quote, wasn't a big deal. Jade got really close. Okay. There are a lot of things in this where we were giving her probably too much benefit of the doubt and trying to convince ourselves essentially that she was just phrasing things really badly and that she might still be coming from a good place and not mean it the way she was saying it and things like that. So I tried to help her rephrase that basically by saying that I know it can help if you've been out of trauma long enough to like start believing things might be safer now than they used to be, and to like start adding more and more positive or even neutral experiences so you can start to believe that you might be safe. But then I brought up how that can be interrupted if any new trauma happens. And she asked me why any new trauma would happen. So I talked about essentially how common that is statistically. And some of the conversation alluded to like the trauma that we were discussing being abuse or like sexual trauma essentially. And she asked me why I wouldn't just look for those red flags and avoid those people. Which is very victim blaming, but also not how any of this works. So I argued against that because that's not foolproof, and there's also so many situations where trauma responses and things like that like will cause you, upon seeing those red flags, to, for instance, fawn instead of trying to get out of the situation. But I said that even if, like, let's say that that would work, I would be constantly looking for those red flags. And she said that it shouldn't be constant, that it shouldn't be like taking up that much of my life, because it would be like letting my trauma run my life. So in my notes I summarized it as, so I guess it's my responsibility to never be abused or traumatized again, but I shouldn't let that take up too much of my time or energy, because then I'm not really living my life and letting my trauma control me. And then I also brought up that things can happen outside of relationships where there isn't any time for red flags. Or, depending on your perspective, it's all red flags from the beginning, but it doesn't matter because you can't get out of the situation until it's over. Just like walking down the street randomly in public, whatever. And she actually said, quote, "That's not common." And then asked why we wouldn't just avoid the places those things happen, which is like one of the textbook examples of victim blaming. Which is really, really frustrating. But I need to emphasize, this is someone who advertises herself as specializing in trauma and having that be like the focus of her entire career for decades. Which made me like start to wonder how she could possibly think that trauma isn't common when she's working with it all the time. Like, it's one thing to just be like ignorant of the statistics or something like that, but to be constantly exposed to the reality of it and still think it's uncommon is baffling to me. And I seriously can't come up with any explanation other than just like denial, that it makes her feel safer, I guess. Which I do. This is going to sound like I'm making excuses for her, but I do genuinely believe she was trying to reassure me. And that's where some victim blaming can have like good intentions but still be very bad, because if she's trying to tell me that my trauma history makes me safer, essentially, because I will be better than the average person at seeing red flags, so I don't have to worry as much about being traumatized again, I can see how that's an attempt at reassurance. But it's not true, and it's victim blaming. And the flip side is that manipulators and potential abusers and everything are also looking for signs that someone might be easier to abuse or manipulate or control. And sometimes trauma responses from past trauma and stuff like that will put people solidly in that category. Not always, but sometimes. Even trauma responses that used to be genuinely effective and helpful could keep you or put you in a bad situation if the situation isn't the same. Not to mention that the good manipulators will show fewer red flags than the average person at first, because that's the point. So I guess no red flags is also a red flag. Oh, this was in that same appointment, but it ties into the types of, like, when she would actually ask a question finally, and when it would show how little she was listening or absorbing the stuff we were saying about DID. She seemed confused when I said I don't remember the trauma and only know of some of it now. And she asked me how I have any symptoms or how it is affecting me at all if I don't remember. Which is frustrating because dissociative amnesia isn't just a system thing. And you can absolutely have trauma symptoms of things you don't remember. But also, even if I have none of the trauma symptoms, the alters in the system who remember it have them. And it's not just about me, so maybe that argument would mean I don't need therapy, but a lot of the rest of the system does. And we've talked about so many of those basic things so many times, and we've emphasized the amnesia thing and the basics of how it works and all of that so many times before that point. Oh yeah, she also said at some point in that conversation that if I did end up in an abusive relationship again, I would know to leave right away. So I had to explain how trauma responses work and why people stay in those relationships out of fear and all kinds of other reasons. And that's the point in my like writing down everything where I was like, she got super close to sounding like she was victim blaming. And then I stopped and like replayed it and I was like, no, that's textbook victim. That's not close. That is textbook straight up, absolutely victim blaming multiple times in several different ways. So I'm glad it didn't take us very long once we got out of the appointment. And I knew the whole time that there were problems with what she was saying, but it didn't click all the way that it was victim blaming until I was putting all of it down and was out of the situation and was safe and venting about it, that I was like, wait a minute, that's just actually victim blaming. So, like I said, we are not seeing that therapist anymore. We haven't told her why. I don't really expect her to ever find this, but if she does, I hope she would take it to heart and do better. But I talked it through with my old/current therapist that I don't really expect that any good would come out of like challenging her on it directly, especially based on how she reacted in the appointment to me, like arguing against those points very kindly and with a lot of generosity, and essentially just trying to give her chance after chance after chance to backtrack and be like, wait, no, that's not what I meant that to sound like. But yeah, we've decided for now to stick with our old therapist out of pocket for a little bit before trying to look for another new therapist. We had too many things all at once that we need to be processing and talking through with someone we already know is safe before we start working on that again. And there's a little more wiggle room in our budget now, so it's a little more feasible to do that. Not long term still, but for now at least. I'm really glad that we didn't find therapists like this much sooner, because we might have listened. But we had already done enough work and enough research on our own and everything, but enough like work with other therapists and our own research and all of that, enough of our own processing and everything. But yeah, I have gone over this with several different people who have a good background for telling how bad some of these things are, including my old/current therapist. And it is absolutely victim blaming. It's not borderline, it's not almost kinda, it's just victim blaming. And it's so frustrating. And I can kind of see how that kind of denial would make it easier to do her job. Especially working with traumatized kids a lot, if she has kids or is close to any kids in general. That it would be a kind of comforting lie in a way to convince yourself that you or your kids or whoever aren't actually in any danger for these things that you see all the time, because you know better or you've taught them better or whatever it is. Feel free to share like similar types of experiences you've had with therapy in the past if you want to. It would also probably help us a lot if you would share some positive therapy experiences in the comments. especially whenever we get to the point of trying to look for a new therapist again. Feeling a little discouraged and disillusioned about the whole thing again, but anything that happened to you or anything that might ever happen to you in the future is not your fault. There's no you should have known better, or not gone to that place, or not spent time with that person, or you should have seen those red flags, none of that. Or you should have known to get out sooner, or not worn that, or whatever it is. It's only the responsibility of the abuser, the perpetrator, whatever. And to some extent, the society that makes so many excuses for it. But never ever the victim. And there are so many situations where it can be really easy to see in hindsight. But that doesn't mean that you asked for it, or that you should have known better and not done it or whatever. Even if you look back and can point out 200 red flags and say, but I felt so uncomfortable, I knew something was off, but I didn't know what, any of that. It's not your fault. And it's not reassuring to tell people that it is. And I know that people who are trying to be reassuring aren't thinking about the fact that that's what they're saying. But if you say you don't have to worry about anything like that ever happening again because you know better now, or it made you stronger or whatever, you don't have to worry about ever being hurt again because of how much stronger or smarter or whatever you are now because of it, it's giving the trauma way too much credit. And if anything ever does happen to them again, you're saying it's their fault. Something I saw recently that I really liked related to the whole idea that trauma makes you stronger and everything is a distinction that I think is really helpful. And the analogy was, if you break like a piece of wood and glue it back together with wood glue, that it wasn't breaking it that made it stronger. It was the process of healing it, of gluing it back together. And that took time and resources to get the glue and everything. And the person who broke the board doesn't get the credit for fixing it. So there are ways to become stronger after horrible things happen, and going through like the recovery and healing process and stuff like that can leave you stronger than you were before. You can become stronger than you were before, but you get the credit. You did that. I wish I remembered who said that. It was just something random on TikTok, and I don't think I could find it again. If any of you know who it was, please credit them in the comments. But it was also probably the type of thing that, like, it was a TikTok of a tweet of a Reddit post or something, so it might be hard to figure out who originally said it, but I like the analogy a lot. And if I ever find who said it, I will also put it in comments or description or something. But yeah, I think that's everything, and I'm going to not just keep venting about it in detail, because I did that already multiple times, including in therapy and in our Patreon exclusive vlog. So yeah, that's the update. I guess we will update you again probably at any point that we are looking for a new therapist again, or maybe once we have another new therapist again, we'll update then. I don't know. We'll see. But for now, we are sticking with the therapist we've had for years, who we know is safe and actually helps us a lot, at least for a little bit, to get through. Just to get through right now, and then work up to trying again with another new therapist later. So yeah, share your stories, positive or negative, in the comments. I brain. I'm dissociating. I hope you liked this video and that it was helpful in some way or interesting or whatever. Like I said, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. We can validate each other's bad experiences and share positive ones as well to encourage people that some therapists don't suck. We are no longer pretending that we might just suddenly get back on top of doing 2 videos a week. We're gonna try for 1 video a week for right now, and if we get on top of that and get ahead with videos again, we might try to go back to 2. We have a lot of general health stuff coming up that's interrupting things a lot, but we'll see how much we can stay on top of once a week and some streaming and all of that. But check out all of the things we have linked in the description. We have a special going on our Patreon right now. We filmed a knitting project from start to finish with no talking or anything like that, just like the knitting sounds and the background sounds and stuff. And so it's a cool, like, calming thing. We got the idea from people saying that they liked the knitting sounds and stuff like that when we would do knitting live streams. So we made a version of that that doesn't have any of the talking or any of that in it. And if you join any tier of our Patreon during the time frame that I don't remember but will be listed if you look at our Patreon, if you click the link it'll say what the when the special goes through. But yeah, we have that going, and you can check out the other perks that are on there as well, and also the other fun things we have linked in our description. But I'm trying to make my end screen sections of videos a little bit shorter, so we'll see how I did while dissociating this much. But thank you for watching. Bye!